Hello, I'm Locke, Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me for the next Legal Line show. It's actually two shows. We're very fortunate to have on the show Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's our United States Congressman for District 6. Dr. Cassidy is going to talk to us about the big issues that face our nation. He's also going to talk to us about the issues that face our nation internationally, the Arab Springs, all the conflict with Iran, the wars winding down, and we're also going to talk about the big issue of debt here in the United States and unemployment. So join us on the next Legal Lines with our United States Congressman, Dr. Bill Cassidy. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's our United States Congressman for District 6 here in Louisiana. Bill, thanks again for doing another show. We have so much to talk about. We just need to keep going.
That sounds great.
Let's talk about, we're talking about the world economy, and frankly, at this point, the Federal Reserve Bank was contemplating somehow helping them out. Discuss your analysis of that.
There is, in fairness to the world, to the Federal Reserve, our global economy is so intertwined. They're concerned that if the European economy tanks, that
it'll pull us down the drain?
Pull us down as well. That's actually a good argument. I guess my argument with the Federal Reserve is let's have that discussion openly. Don't do it through currency swaps that no one can understand. And so in that, the American people don't participate in the decision. Do it in a way which may be messier, but discuss it so that if we do make a policy decision as a country, we make it as a country and not by just a few behind a curtain.
It's interesting. You said they're doing it using currency swaps. Explain to the folks what that means. As I understand it, we're basically giving them high value dollars for cheap value euros. Is that right?
Well, the euro right now trades higher than the dollar. But there is, as I understand, that there is a swap of euros and dollars to put dollars into the European system for those banks that must pay back loans in dollars. And there is an agreement going forward that those dollars will then be paid back at some agreed upon rate now.
Down the road, hopefully.
Now, the fact that you and I know a little bit about it, but not much, and the American people know a little bit, not much, is part of my criticisms.
Right.
What's the rationale? What are the terms? What is that agreed upon rate in the future? Let's have this policy discussion out in the open. Not everybody will want to participate, but we'll feel better if we have a chance to.
Let's also explain the whole concept of QE 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4 to the folks, quantitative easing that the Fed does.
The Fed has, in an effort to keep our economy doing better, has put lots of money out into the economy. So banks now have balance sheets where they have a lot of money on reserve.
And can borrow it very cheaply from each other and the Fed.
Theoretically, that means that if I am a developer and I want to build a commercial building, that I can get a lower interest rate to build that commercial building. That's the good part of it. The bad part of it is it dilutes the value of the dollar.
And I'm reading also that really folks aren't really borrowing the money. They're not willing to take the risk of another loan and not being able to pay it back.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, because some of the people who are willing to take a risk cannot get money from the banks, because the banks can actually put the money in the Federal Reserve and get a interest rate on what they deposit.
With no risk.
With no risk. The other person it hurts is the saver. If you're a senior citizen who has saved $50,000 as a nest egg, and now the bank's paying you 0.5% interest, you can't live on the interest of your nest egg. We always tell folks who are older, put your money in safe investment vehicles. You don't want to be subject to market fluctuations.
Right.
But now the interest rate paid on these safe investment vehicles is so low that may not be something you can do and live off the interest.
And it's interesting, my understanding of this whole concept of quantitative easing, putting more money into our economy, usually historically results in higher interest rates down the road, because there's, as rather higher inflation down the road.
That's the concern. That over too much money chasing too few products increases prices. Now, again, in fairness, that has not happened yet. But that is the concern, and it continues to be a concern.
Which bottom line means that ultimately down the road, because of these practices, folks are going to have to pay more money for things that they need and buy.
That's worst case scenario.
Right.
Has not yet happened, but that's a concern.
Let's talk about Freddie and Fannie, because interesting names, but bottom line is they are the institutions that now we, the taxpayers, own, who are broke and help finance or package mortgages. Explain to the folks what we're talking about.
When I got a mortgage for my house long ago, the bank did not keep my mortgage. The bank, I think we had L&B whenever L&B was still around, and L&B repackaged that mortgage and sold it elsewhere.
Put them together with a whole bunch of other ones.
Now the guarantee that when I got my mortgage, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, two kind of quasi-government entities, gave me a guarantee as well, so I got a lower mortgage rate. But that guarantee went through L&B. For the longest time, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae helped keep mortgage rates lower to encourage home ownership. The problem is they were paying their chief executives hundreds of billions of dollars.
It's crazy.
Crazy. So it's something which there is an implicit taxpayer guarantee, and if you're the CEO, which by the way is appointed by the president, you're making hundreds of millions of dollars. The American people didn't think it was right.
Well, and when the collapse occurred in 2008, 2009, Freddie and Fannie collapsed. They were going bankrupt, and the government basically took them over at that point. Is that right?
So Locke is the worst of all political institutions. They were quasi-private, quasi-public. The politicians in Washington at the time told them to guarantee loans, which were probably not the right ones to guarantee. They ended up holding the bag. They go upside down, but it's not they that hold the bag, it's the taxpayer.
It's us.
It's us.
Me and you.
So folks are getting paid $100 billion a year, and in fairness, doing things which previous Congresses and presidents told them to, ended up making bad investments, and the taxpayers holding the bag. That is the anger of the American people today. That's my anger and your anger.
And there was an act that was passed by the Democratic-controlled House, Senate, and presidency called Dodd-Frank, and it didn't touch Freddie or Fannie, as I understand
So after
it.
the 2008 economic meltdown, there was concern that financial institutions had done poorly, which they did.
Right.
So we have to reform them. Well, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were the center of this bad behavior, but Dodd-Frank did everything but take care of them. So if you had some problem that you wanted to address, you threw it in Dodd-Frank, but the one thing that caused our economic meltdown was not addressed. And that's the biggest criticism of Dodd-Frank.
And the bottom line is, when you say it affected everybody else, it imposed many, many more regulations that ultimately should result in additional cost to the borrower.
Going back to our earlier part of our conversation, where you said, listen, people can't get loans now. When you talk to commercial banks, they would like to lend. But because of these new requirements, they cannot lend to people who they know are good credit risk. They know would pay back the loan. They know would help create jobs in the community. They cannot lend them money because of the new restrictions. Community bankers are very upset about this.
So Bill, juxtapose, talk about the differences between how the Republicans versus the Democrats want to make the economy grow. We've talked about them trying to use the Federal Reserve and them pumping money into the economy so hopefully banks would lend it and it would be cheap. That really hadn't happened. So what else can we do?
Well, there's two paradigms, if you will. Again, if you think about the if you think about the Keystone XL project, that is a Republican type project. It is a private resource, it is a natural resource that will be developed, and there will be lots of people employed in all parts of that, creating private sector jobs. What the president has so far favored is borrowing money, the federal government borrowing money and investing in things what he calls green energy, and that in that investment try and create jobs that way. It's kind of like picking yourself up by your bootstraps though. And some of the bad examples are a $300 million loan guarantee to a company that then later goes bankrupt, and the 1,000 people they employ are out of a job 2 years later.
All right, let's continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Dr. Bill Cassidy, our United States Congressman. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke, Meredith, and again, very pleased to have on the show today our United States Congressman for District 6, Dr. Bill Cassidy. Bill, we're talking about the difference between how, for the most part, Democrats want to help grow the economy versus Republicans want to help grow the economy. You were using Keystone as an example of the Republican model, which is we got private investors, private money, building a private pipeline and producing a private product versus the government, I guess, picking and choosing the type of industries they want to focus resources in?
Yes. So one good example of that is the Solyndra solar panel company. And I forget whether the loan guarantee was $300 to $500 million, but even people in the solar industry thought it was a bad investment. That, listen, their annual revenue is only $100 million, but you're about to give them a $300 million loan. Now, there's some other irregularities. The government should be the first person paid back, but the Department of Energy allowed others to take precedent. I won't go there, just say it may be illegal. But the company went bankrupt. And people who looked at the business plan objectively said this company is going to fail in September of 2011, 2 years beforehand. In September of 2011, it failed. So it was understandable. Now, Republicans would say, why is the federal government attempting to pick a winner or loser when the market says it can't succeed?
And not only the particular company, but choosing where resources should be focused.
Correct. So I have more faith in the small business owner who says, listen, I have a small business, I need to employ 3 more people because I see a market here, than I do in the Department of Energy to say, oh, listen, we're going to do a $300 or $400 million loan to this company to see what they can manufacture that hopefully will find a market.
Of course, as we were discussing just briefly before, the folks who are paying this money back, the money that the government gave to, in this case, Solyndra, are you and me and our grandbabies and our children.
Now that's not
through taxes.
Exactly. Now that's not to say that government doesn't have a role. Clearly, there will be times when the government will say, we are going to invest in a university that is going to attempt to do biomedical research and to find a cure for cancer, and that there may be some spinoff here that ends up benefiting not only the economy but also patients. There may be something where they say, we want this technology to develop, but it has to be a well-vetted business plan that people say this can succeed in the market on its own, not something that someone says it's going to go bankrupt in September of 2011, and sure enough, it goes bankrupt in September of 2011.
And so I guess if you had to say a big summary of the difference in philosophies would be, on the Democrat side, they prefer to receive money via taxes or borrowing that are going to be paid back with taxes, and allocate resources to a particular segment of society, to folks that they choose to give the money to, or the government itself provides those services or products. Whereas the Republican side or the conservative side says, leave it up to the private system. They do it more efficiently, effectively, and they direct resources where they need to be, with a few exceptions.
So basically, I would put it, I agree with you, the conservative side says we have more faith in the genius of the American people, and the liberal side says we have more faith in the genius of American government. I actually have more faith in the American people than the genius of the American government.
Another way to say it, I guess, is conservatives or Republicans believe in smaller government and let the private sector decide, whereas the Democratic side says we want bigger government. And that's really borne out by the percentage, as I understand it, that the government is now spending of the gross national product, right?
Yes, that has increased. So to historic highs, I think, since World War II. Now, World War II, obviously, we were
fighting a war.
Fighting 2 wars. But on the other hand, the average small businesswoman has created more jobs than many government programs. And so we want that average small businesswoman to keep her resources to keep on creating those jobs.
Bill, let's discuss the kind of the mindset, it seems like, of the particular administration with the constitutional powers of Congress versus the presidency. I was reading this morning, as a matter of fact, that the president has decided that he is going to appoint cabinet folks, despite the fact that Congress is saying we're still in session, but the president's saying, no, you're not in session, and I get to appoint folks that I want to go in particular positions because you're in recess. And typically that's not supposed to happen. Explain the conflict.
There is a struggle in Washington between the power of the executive branch, the president, and the power of the legislative branch, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate. The president is trying to take more power unto himself. And obviously the House of Representatives is trying to protect, we think, what the Constitution tells us is our power. That is a struggle. The president has decided to go someplace where presidents have not previously gone before, which is to unilaterally define what a recess is, and after defining it, then making an appointment as a recess appointment. By the way, recess appointments came about because when our country started, Congress would not meet for 6 months. And so the president would have the ability to make an appointment in that 6-month period. You just couldn't shut down government. Well, now we don't meet because we're home for Christmas and New Year's, but we're going back up in another week.
Right.
So even the original intent was different than how it's now applied. But that said, the House of Representatives has stayed in session through this period to an extent, and the president is ignoring that.
The reason this is of concern to me is I also recall that the president instructed the Attorney General Holder to no longer defend the Defense of Marriage Act. Explain to the folks what that conflict is.
The Defense of Marriage Act says that a marriage will be between a man and a woman. Now, this is important, and Locke, you know better than me, because if a state of Massachusetts allows 2 women to marry, then the state of Louisiana would be obligated to honor that marriage. This says on a federal level, no, that the marriage is between a man and a woman, and if Massachusetts decides to defy that, it's not, other states are not obligated to
accord full faith and credit.
Yeah, exactly.
So we accept your determination of their status.
Yes. So the president doesn't agree with that, and so has instructed his attorney general not to defend it. Whatever you feel about the legislation, the fact is the president is supposed to defend he can't unilaterally say we're not going to defend. He is supposed to defend those laws. He has unilaterally decided not to pursue his own agenda, not necessarily to follow the law.
And so just to summarize, the United States Congress has passed a law that was signed by a president.
Correct.
And it became the law of the United States of America. And it had been being defended by the Attorney General for the United States of America. But then President Obama said, I don't agree with what you 450 or so Congress people and 100 senators decided that the president before me agreed to. So I am going to just decide that I don't like that. I'm not going to defend it. You guys go do what you want.
So when I was in 3rd grade, I learned at Jefferson Terrace Elementary School that the executive, the president, is the one who executes the laws.
Enforces them.
But it's the Congress that passes.
Right.
The executor is basically saying, I don't care what you passed, I'm going to ignore it.
I get to decide.
And that's, whatever you think about the law, that is not the way the Constitution was set up.
It seems unconstitutional. We'll be right back. We have Dr. Bill Cassidy, our United States Congressman. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. Again, I'm Locke Meredith, and we're very pleased to have on the show, for the second show, Dr. Bill Cassidy. He's our United States Congressman for District 6. Bill, we were talking about kind of some of the issues and the grind between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Let's shift gears a little bit. What are the Republicans proposing to do to help the economy grow, generate jobs, provide more revenues for the government to reduce the debt, all the positive things that come from that?
There are 25 different job-related bills that the House Republicans have sent to the Senate that the President and Harry Reid, the President of the U.S. Senate, do not wish to consider. Among them are things like Keystone XL, which we referenced earlier.
Right.
But the others are repeal of certain regulations being put forth by the EPA, which will have marginal impact upon the environment, but a maximal impact upon the economy. Recall we spoke that if you increase the cost of energy, for example, to a manufacturing plant, the manufacturing plant, oh heck, I can't afford this, they move overseas.
Because they have other options. They don't have to stay here.
They have other options. So the more difficult you make it for a plant to function here through regulations or taxes, the more likely they leave. The New York Times had an editorial, David Brooks, one of the editorialists, was coming back from China. And he says, this has become a common conversation. I'm sitting next to a businessman coming back from China. They're so excited about China because they said the Chinese want our businesses. We don't feel like the United States does. What that really means is that the businessman is feeling encouraged to move his or her business to China. That means those jobs leave us.
And go to China.
So we have to recognize that there is a cost of regulation. The power to destroy is the power to tax or to regulate. And we fool ourselves if we think that taxes or regulation do not destroy jobs.
And so I guess one of the legs of the stool that the Republicans would use to improve our economic situation and produce jobs is obviously reduce regulations that cause that event to occur.
Now, and if you speak to the people who are regulated, they will say, judge us by our outcomes, not by our processes. We can give you clean air and clean water. Just say, we want you to have clean air and clean water and tell us how clean it must be, but don't tell us how to get there. A lot of these regulations tell you how to get there.
Well, Bill, I've even read that the EPA has now imposed such strict restrictions on coal production, electricity, that some of them just shutting down. And of course, as there is video of President Obama saying, electric rates are necessarily going to skyrocket.
So one of the understandings of renewable energy, which the president, we spoke earlier, is subsidizing companies like Solyndra, is that you've got to raise the price of natural gas, oil, and coal. As you raise that price, you don't have to subsidize the quote-unquote green energy more. Well, that's kind of what you're doing with regulation.
That's right.
You're raising the price of coal, natural gas, and oil so that these have a competitive advantage.
Because if it was in the real marketplace, there's no way that type of electric generation, meaning solar, wind, etc., could possibly compete economically with coal and natural gas and oil.
Not only because it's more expensive to produce, but also because it's more irregular. So you don't get solar energy when the clouds are there. You don't get wind energy when the wind's not blowing.
And of course, half the day is nighttime, or at least eight hours or so.
Yeah, and there's just other considerations. Texas has a lot of windmills, but the wind doesn't blow in Texas in summer, and Texas uses the most electricity in the summer to air condition their homes.
And as I understand, it's not that the Republicans don't want the renewable energy. They're just saying we want every piece of energy we can get our hands on.
Well, and that's true, and we also want that which is able to be achieved by market mechanisms, not necessarily by increased regulations driving coal plants out of existence.
Let's talk about the tax leg of the stool that the Republicans want to use to improve the economy. We've talked about reduction of regulations. Likewise, I've heard it espoused that we want to reduce taxes. Explain to the folks why.
Well, there's a couple different aspects to taxes. One is corporate taxes and the other is individual taxes. So in the corporate tax, Republicans are looking at a company like GE, which paid no taxes last year. We're thinking, wow, GE with hundreds of billions of dollars worth of market of capital value not paying a tax.
And their CEO, as I recall, is a big donor and supporter of President Obama, and likewise was appointed by President Obama onto his Jobs Council.
I understand that to be the case. And so what we would say is, listen, make the corporate tax less, but make it apply to more companies. Don't give people exceptions so they completely get out of paying taxes, but on the other hand, lower the overall rate. By the way, countries like Ireland have tax rates, corporate tax rates of 10% lower than ours. So our companies are moving to Ireland for that lower tax rate.
In fact, I thought I read that, frankly, our corporate tax rate was, if not the highest, among the highest in the world.
Again, that's my understanding. So if we lower it, not basically stay here, pay your taxes here because we're as low as any place else, but we remove some of the exceptions so more companies pay it, then we have increased revenue with lower rates.
All right, and then I've also heard maybe the third leg of the stool is dealing with the whole health care debacle, Obamacare and insurance companies, all of that. Explain to the folks what the Republicans are proposing.
Yeah, the president's health care bill obviously passed 2 years ago.
And again, let's let folks know, you are a medical doctor and have practiced for years on end.
And I work at Earl K. Long Hospital, a hospital for the uninsured. So my mission in my professional life is to help people who don't have insurance get health care. But I remember I was in Washington, I voted against the president's health care bill, and I was in my office the day after it passed, and the president's debt commission was on TV, on C-SPAN. And they were making the statement that our indebtedness as a country is an incredible threat, and what is driving our indebtedness is healthcare entitlements.
I recall.
And I thought, wait a second, we just passed a bill that's going to make what you tell me is the problem that much worse. And
that's been borne out,
and
has it not? Premiums have gone up significantly.
Not only has the family's premiums gone up significantly, but also what states are projecting they're going to pay for their own expenses are going up dramatically because, again, of the president's health care bill. So there's a whole set of increased obligations by individuals, families, states, and the federal government because of this bill. I think we can achieve the same thing of getting everybody health care, but at a much lower cost. It's just going to take a different approach.
Let's shift gears real fast. Let's talk about the hot spots in the rest of the world. We've got Iran threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz. You've got the Arab Spring going on over in the Middle East. You got the Eurozone. Looks like their economy may collapse. What are your thoughts in this regard?
I think the United States is a country called for leadership in the rest of the world. And what we see around the world is potential instability. So we, as the United States, do have a role there. We want first to have a role to promote freedom. We want those countries, those Arab countries that have been under military governments, to have freedom.
Yes.
But we also want it to be done in a way which, frankly, doesn't cost the blood of an American boy or girl serving in the armed services. And so the question is, how do you accomplish that? I think we do have a leadership role. The question is, how do we exercise that leadership role? It has to be within what our Constitution says is allowed, and also within what the will of the American people permits.
Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Locke.
Pleasure to see you again. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Our United States Congressman, Dr. Bill Cassidy, thank you for being with us today.